Hi, what's going on, Michelle? It's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too, as always.
Thanks for hopping on with me here. I know we're all quarantined right now, but quarantines are good opportunities to do collaborations. In fact, we could probably call it that, a QC. So
QC. I like it.
yeah, no, it's awesome. And I know, you're a big thought leader in this space, which is really why I think the timing of our chat today is so important because everyone is now either fixed behind a desk at home or they're working mobily, but they're not in their office, they're not in their traditional workspace. And where attention is right now is totally shifting. So I first wanted to, first off, thank you for doing this, but also introduce you. Berman Media, this is your company that you run. You run a kick-ass agency that helps agents and lenders essentially create sales funnels and just generate business off of Instagram. But you can elaborate on that a little bit more and tell us all specifically what it is your company does and how it's helpful. And then we can jump into a little bit about the market and what's going on.
For sure, yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I know you're someone who I think a lot of us look up to in the industry just
Oh,
as a
thanks.
whole. So I'm just grateful that we have the relationship that we do, and I'm looking forward to continuing that long into the future. But specifically, you're spot on. So the name of my company is Berman Media PD, and we specialize in working with real estate agents and lenders. And I teach them how to utilize Instagram as the medium or platform to generate a pipeline of leads essentially
Uh-huh.
that are on fire for them. So I'm not teaching you to go chase them. I'm teaching you to create the type of content you need to so that they can come to you. Nobody wants to spend a bunch of money on Zillow and nobody wants to spend a bunch of money on grassroots and traditional marketing if they don't have to. So, and really social media is where it's at. So I teach people how to do it.
Which is awesome. And you obviously do a great job with it because this is what you're well known for. So results
Yeah.
speak for themselves. This is not something you just kind of threw together. You've been practicing these methods, applying them, and you do what you preach, but all the people that are either students of your course or, other professionals that you collaborate and partner up with have been always able to speak to the results. So that's awesome. And I
Yeah.
commend you on putting together something that actually works and is not just some gimmick
Yeah.
out there in the marketing space. But right now, like, obviously there's no sports to watch. People are at home. They're supposed to be working from home, but we all know not many people work when they're at home, either because of distractions or just laziness or a combination of the two. So they're on their phones, they're on their media devices, they're streaming content, they're absorbing content, they're on social media, getting sucked into that vortex of, what's going on right now with this virus and how it's impacting things. But there's a lot of attention there. There's a lot of eyeballs. So what are you seeing, without being biased because you've got your coaching clients and they obviously do a good job since you're behind them, but what are you seeing right now that agents, where people, specifically real estate agents, where they're missing the ball, where they're missing an opportunity right now?
Yeah, so like today, the opportunity that agents are missing, and from my consumption of them on both Instagram, Facebook, really any medium that you could want to use, the problem is that they are addressing the coronavirus situation as if it's not a big deal, right? So a lot of them would be posting like out, still doing showings, virtual, still alive and well, right? Which is great, but the problem is that they are not connecting with their existing pipeline. They're not focused on that actual core group that has already built business with them. They're not sending messages saying like, hey, I just want to check in on you. How are you doing? How's your family? Like, are you okay? They're not doing those things. So a lot of the agents that I've seen and that I've worked with personally have lost a massive chunk of their pipeline. They've either totally just dropped off
Mm-hmm.
or they have a lot of their pipeline that are pumping the brakes, but the agents themselves are not taking the time to go to the space, go to Instagram, go to Facebook, go to Twitter, go to wherever to promote like, hey guys, we're going to be okay. And this isn't 2008, right? The entire thing is not around the housing market crash, because here in Arizona where I live, like the market's still really strong. People are still buying and selling houses remotely. So I think that's the big issue is you're not going to the platform to talk about the calm, right? There's so much power in the calm, and
Yeah.
we're not delivering that information.
Definitely. And this goes back to maybe some of the mistakes or the errors that you see that people make in general, pre-virus times, when they're just putting out content for the sake of putting out content. There's nothing really valuable about it. They're either saying, list your house with me, or I just sold this, or I'm the top producer at my firm, or these are my firm's attributes and all their accolades, which is like, broker generated content. And that's kind of promoting and upping the brand of the brokerage, but it's telling me nothing about the person themselves. So now with an agent, like if you had to give them, if somebody was new, or they've had a little bit of a presence online, but they haven't done anything with it. I mean, in a few sound bites, what would be your advice to them of what they can do right now to use this as a massive opportunity to stand out and forge ahead of what everyone else is not doing, since they're just, either posting the same old stuff, putting out the same type of content, and not really offering anything that either calms them down, as you said, that's socially more acceptable or responsible, or is sensitive to the times, but also like valuable. What would your advice be?
So first and foremost, agents as a whole have a massive opportunity to utilize Instagram specifically to be an authority in their space, right? So the agents that have either approached me, heard me, even talked to you, I'm sure over and over and over again, we talk about adding value. We talk about who are you? What do you specialize in? How can you help me in a different way? And one of a good friend of mine, Chelsea Pike, somebody who, again, I have a huge fondness for her, and I chatted last week, and we talked about this exact thing of, like, if I meet you at a party and I walk up to you and I'm like, hey, you're a real estate, or you tell me, hey, I'm a real estate agent, my response to you is going to be, great, cool, I know 1,000 of them. Like, what kind of real estate agent are you? How can you help me? So in this time, I also think now more than ever, presenting ourselves as an authority in a specific space, right? The riches are in the niches. There's a reason why people make that comment. And nowadays, especially during COVID-19 and just the massive panic, right? We have to be the authority figures in the space. We have to create high value content. We're looking as consumers, as a home buyer or a home seller, if you will. We're looking for the agent who during this time is the person I can count on, the person I can lean on to calm me down in a very eccentric market, right? Where everyone's just freaking out. So what can you do? You can record a video talking about what you're doing for your agents. I have out of state, like say you're an agent that has an out of state buyer, right? Go to the property by yourself, because you're allowed to do that, right? And record a video, upload it to YouTube, and share it with them on a YouTube channel. Create a Vimeo channel. Create something that gives value to those out-of-state buyers so that you don't lose them, right? I think a lot of agents have this fear of, well, I can't connect with them. I can't go show home, so I'm just going to sit in my house and just not do anything. And I'm like, we're always so used to having to put off our marketing because we're too busy. But now people are putting off their marketing because they're worried about when their next deal is going to come in. And it's like, you can't put off your marketing anymore.
No, this is not the time to. But unfortunately, it's a time that a lot of people kind of constrict and withdraw and pull away, which it's actually not supposed to be. So, yeah, but that was great. I love that in terms of what you've been seeing are the opportunities out there for them and what they could do. Do you want to give me some examples outside of the YouTube and Vimeo platforms that you just talked about, where people can show property and do things virtually? Like, there's ways to improvise, there's ways to pivot, there's ways to be still innovative right now in this market space, given that we're in these like super extreme times. I mean, the whole global economy is essentially on shutdown. There are markets that are not, though. The stock market remains open, the bond market remains open, financial markets in general remain open, real estate remains alive. It's obviously going to function in a very different space, but do you see now like that maybe, a few months from now, if we're trying to forecast how the role of what you do as a coach and what your business does, and, those of us that are online, that role and that importance is only just going to skyrocket more, or is it going to be just the same value as what it was before?
No, I think now more than ever, your ability to pivot to an online platform is essential. Like, I think the agents who can figure out how to do this now are the agents that are still going to be in business in 6 months when we can go back to business as usual, right? I think a good example is back in 2008 when the housing market crashed and, you know, everybody was in an uproar. If you look at the statistics, they speak for themselves. But the agents during that time that actually built the behind the scenes framework were still building their pipeline, still doing the marketing correctly. They were the ones that actually came back stronger once the market turned back around. So to circle back to that, it's like nowadays, like right now, I think we need to be focused on digital innovation, right? How can we use Instagram? How can we use Facebook? How can we use Zoom more frequently in specific ways, right? So, you know, I have an agent that I work with that does all of his virtual team meeting or all of his team meetings virtually now. And he's got like 57 agents on his team. You know, he's got agents in the entire state of Arizona from top to south that are working with him. So he's talking about how can we digitalize our showings? How can we digitalize our coffee, you know, buyers meetings, that instead of going and having coffee, how can we set it up on Zoom where we actually have a cup of coffee and we're like clinking through the computer and building connection that way, right? Being really innovative. Maybe as a real estate agent, you could take this time to transition into whatever your authority space or your value, if you will, turn it into a little online like PDF that you can email to your pipeline. So you're still always in front of them, right? Or that you can share. Maybe it's a little online course about the 5 things you can be doing while you're preparing to buy a home, right? There's lots of ways to innovate how you connect with your pipeline right now. That doesn't involve hand-to-hand, you know, shaking or hugging in real life. I hope if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. That was awesome. So much good stuff in there.
Just honestly, you know, if you're a business owner or you're someone in this space, looking at this time as an opportunity and not as a panic, right? Or as a space to withdraw.
Yeah.
I think I would love to hear your take on, you know, how can they actually utilize this time and not be so worried about, you know, your next transaction, but be worried about how can I ensure that I have a lot of transactions when this time flips around. And I think specifically on the finance side, you know, you see a lot of people that are pulling out all of their investments from lots of different places, whether that's services that they're invested in, whether that's video services, online coaching, even the stock market, like whatever, like people are pulling all of their money out because they're worried, right? So I would love to hear your take on why that's actually not what you're doing, and kind of why you would think that, or why you would recommend others to not do that.
Yeah, I mean, the financial investment that people make into branding, into marketing themselves, into generating business online, it's more of an essential. It's not necessarily a variable cost or something that's, you know, like almost like a discretionary business item or expense. It's something that's super important. It's absolutely essential. It is now, and more than ever, people have to see it that way. They can't see it as this thing that was like, okay, that was an extra, and if times get tough, we're going to trim this. Because what are you going to fall back on? You know, we're in a different environment now, totally different environment. I mean, even if the travel bans get lifted and, you know, everyone is allowed to go back to work, it's not going to be like everyone's just going to flood their offices and be back to high-fiving and hugging it out. I mean, it's going to be a very altered reality, which means people are going to have to find different ways to connect. They're going to have to find different ways to generate business. And if you've been doing this already, it's the time to bet on yourself even more. It's the time to double down and go and stick with it, go all in on it. I understand if you were an agent or you were a lender that entered this market just very recently, you didn't have a brand, nobody really knew who you were. You've got an opportunity now to try and create something, but it's going to be difficult. I'm not sugarcoating it. I mean, you're starting from ground zero. But for people who've been investing already and then put in time and effort into creating a brand, putting out valuable content, they have a name, they're recognizable. People know who they are. They've already transacted online. Now is absolutely not the time to be pulling back. It's already working for you, or it did in some capacity. You got to have more belief that this is now going to become an even more crowded marketplace. There's going to be more transactions that are going to manifest from this area. And this is the time to go all in on it. It's absolutely not the time to pull back. The mistake I made And I never really was in it, to be honest with you. When I look back to the last market correction or down cycle, which was the housing crash. So I made it through that. But I invested nothing in myself leading up to that. Everyone that was working in and around that time thought, they were all really, they were just so high on the ladder that nothing was going to stop us, and money was still going to be made, and this market's just going to continue ripping, and it was delusional. But then when the rug got pulled out and everybody kind of came crashing down and was scratching their heads figuring out, okay, what do I do now? Very, very few of us, if any, were investing in ourselves. The coaching business, a lot of the companies that are out there that are helping people, that you would cut a check to handle some of these business services for you, they weren't around like they are now. And nobody was putting money and resources into them. So the mistake I made was I never invested really in myself or invested in my business. I didn't have to. The market was doing everything for me, and you develop a false sense of security that way. But now, those systems that are out there, these platforms and things that you can use, these coaching services, these companies that are there to help you generate business, they're worth every dollar, if not more. And to be honest with you, when you think about the cost of some of these services, whether it's in branding or executing content and whatnot, first of all, you don't have the time to do it. You've got to keep your eyes focused on what's going on in an ever-changing market. But when you think of the costs involved, you're only talking in most cases one transaction. If it yields you one transaction as a lender or as a realtor, it's more than paid for itself. So you're not talking about insurmountable odds here, in terms of how this should, how this can really pan out for you, and what's the break even? Will it truly be worth it? Like, it's absolutely worth it. This is the time to do it. This is the time to stick with it. If you have been doing it, do not pull away. I mean, this space is only going to remain hot, and it's more important now than it ever was. So my advice to anyone is continue to bet on yourself, because if you're not going to bet on yourself, then what are you doing anyways? I mean, you were relying on the market to kind of be hot for you in order to prop up and be this expert that you thought you were, this good agent or good lender that you thought you might have been. But now you'll find out if you really are good. And it's the time to continue betting on yourself. So, long-winded answer to your question, but I wouldn't pull away or pull back any of those resources at all. I personally am not. We all know business is going to come back around, and for some, business is still continuing on as normal. It's just a little bit different, but there's still transactions to be done. There's still work to be done. So don't get gun shy now when it comes to these types of expenses.
Yeah, no, I think pivoting right now is so important, right? And understanding that if we talk about Instagram specifically, right, you have to pivot to where your sphere is. Where are they spending their time? If that's Facebook, great. If that's Instagram, great. But most likely it's a combination of the two, right? And this is an opportunity for you to be in front of them every single day, because there's a crap ton more eyeballs that are consuming it, right? Yep. So I think during this time, the excuses of, well, I don't know if I should invest in that because I'm not really sure, when my next transaction is. Like, I mean, trust me, we all get that. We've all been there. We've all experienced times of good and bad and kind of in between, right? But as you said, I think the best thing that you can be doing right now is building that framework of, the foundational side of the content you're creating, right? Are you creating value series stuff? Now, better than ever, it's an opportunity to maybe create an entire video series on this market and how it's not the same as 2008 and why is it not the same, right? Record a video about that, and then record the next one about how you're transitioning your clients into digital, right? How are you building that relationship? And I would beg the question to a lot of real estate agents, when's the last time you emailed one of your clients or texted one of your clients and was like, hey, do you want to FaceTime? Hey, do you want to Zoom just so we can chat and I can check in on your family? Like, I can tell you personally that in the last 2 weeks, I've sent more check-in messages than I've ever sent in my entire career, right? And it's always been because I genuinely care about these people. And these are people who, some of them are in my pipeline, right? Some of them are people who I've wanted to do business with. But 3/4 of them are people who I've already done business with. I'm not actually trying to generate new work from them. But what I am doing is making sure that when they're ready for more work, that I'm the person that they're going to call when that does happen. And Absolutely. How do you do that? You stay in front of them during a time like this where most people are pulling back.